There are things that happen on live television that the cameras catch, and things that happen in the parking lot afterward that nobody ever talks about. Marcus Webb found out on a Thursday. Not a dramatic Thursday, not the kind that announces itself. A Thursday in late October with a low gray sky and the smell of rain that never quite arrived. The kind of day that just sits on you. He was in the parking lot of a dialysis center in Memphis, Tennessee, sitting in the driver's seat of a 2009 Chevy Impala with 187,000 miles on it and a crack in the dashboard that had been spreading slowly for 2 years, like a fault line nobody was doing anything about. The engine was off. He had been sitting there for 23 minutes without going inside. His mother was in there. She had been going in there 3 times a week for 14 months. He had a voicemail on his phone from a number he didn't recognize, an Atlanta area code. He had almost deleted it twice. Something made him listen. The voice on the message said, "My name is Patricia. I'm calling from the Steve Harvey Foundation. Mr. Harvey asked me to reach out personally. We'd like to talk to you about your family's situation, if you're willing." Marcus sat in the parking lot for 4 more minutes. Then he called back. What Patricia told him he would not repeat in full to his wife Sandra until 2 weeks later, when he finally had words for it. He would not tell his mother at all for another month, because he needed to be certain before he said it out loud, and because his mother, a 63-year-old woman named Gloria, who had raised 4 children on a home health aide's salary and had been on the kidney transplant wait list for 2 years and 9 months. His mother had stopped letting herself believe in things that hadn't happened yet as a form of protection, and he did not want to crack that open until he was sure. He was not ready to be sure yet. He drove into the dialysis center parking lot and sat for 23 minutes and then went inside. The Webb family had appeared on Family Feud 6 weeks earlier, in September. They had applied because Marcus's daughter Destiny, who was 12 and is the kind of child who makes things happen through sheer organizational certainty, had seen the application form on a library computer, filled it out without telling anyone, submitted it, and then announced at dinner one evening that their appearance had been confirmed and they should probably start practicing. Marcus had stared at her for a long moment. Sandra had laughed until she cried. They were Marcus and Sandra, both 41. Marcus's sister Renee, 38, a postal worker. Marcus's brother Damon, 35, who drove a city bus and had a laugh that could fill a gymnasium. And Destiny, representing the next generation, sitting in the audience section with her notebook. She had brought a notebook with questions she had written in advance, organized by category, because that is the kind of person she is. Gloria had wanted to come, but couldn't make the trip. She had sent a card. It was tucked in Marcus's jacket pocket the entire taping, and he touched it through the fabric twice when he got nervous. The other family was the Nguyen's from Houston. 4 adult siblings and a father who wore a Vietnamese flag pin on his lapel and had a composure so complete it made you feel calmer just being near him. They were gracious competitors, and they won handily. The Webbs were eliminated in the 3rd round. Marcus had not told Steve Harvey anything about his mother. He hadn't told production, hadn't flagged it in the intake form, hadn't mentioned it when the warm-up comedian did the crowd interview pass. He had come to play a game and go home. He was not there for sympathy. He was there because his 12-year-old daughter had organized them into a television appearance through sheer force of will. And he had decided a long time ago that when Destiny decided something needed to happen, the right response was to get out of her way and let it happen. But Destiny had written it in the notebook, not in the questions, on the last page, in small, careful letters, the way she wrote when she was writing something she wasn't sure she wanted anyone to read. Grandma Gloria is on the transplant list. She goes to dialysis 3 times a week. Daddy drives her. He doesn't tell people because she doesn't want pity. She wants a kidney. This notebook is my way of praying for her. Destiny had left the notebook on her seat when she went to use the restroom during a break. A production coordinator named James had picked it up to set it out of the way, seen the name on the cover, Destiny Webb, age 12, property of me, and opened it to the last page to check for contact information. He read what was there. He closed the notebook. He set it down. He went and found Steve. Steve had already filmed his segment. The taping was wrapping. He was in a side corridor near the production offices when James found him, notebook in hand, and said, "I need to show you something." Steve read the last page. He read it twice. He asked James where the family was. They were at craft services, getting ready to collect their belongings and head to the shuttle. Steve went to craft services. He found Marcus standing at the coffee station, just the two of them for a moment before the rest of the family noticed. Steve put out his hand and Marcus shook it, and Steve said, "I heard about your mother. Tell me about her." Marcus looked at him. He looked at him the way people look at someone when they're deciding whether to be real or whether to deflect. And that decision is happening faster than they can think about it. He told him about the 2019 diagnosis, about the 14 months of dialysis, about the 2.7 years on the transplant list, which was not a long time by the national average. The national average was 5 years, but which was long enough that they had all quietly reorganized their entire lives around it without formally deciding to. Marcus drove Gloria to every session because she didn't like the transport van service, which ran late and smelled like industrial cleaner, and whose drivers sometimes forgot to help her with the door. Renee cooked Sunday dinner every week at Gloria's apartment and stayed to do the dishes, which took longer than it should because she also went through the medicine cabinet to make sure everything was sorted correctly, and none of the prescriptions were running low. And she did this without announcing it, the way she did most things. Damon called their mother every morning at 7:15. Not sometimes, every morning, 7:15, even on the days he was dead tired from a late route. Because Gloria had told him once that 7:15 was when the quiet got heaviest for her. And Damon had filed that information away and never forgotten it. Sandra had cut her hours at the school where she worked as a reading specialist to be available for the days when Marcus couldn't leave work, and Renee was covering a shift. The income reduction was $1,100 a month. They had not replaced it with anything. They had just compressed. The thing that was breaking Marcus, quietly, in a way he had not said to anyone. Not to Sandra, not to his siblings, not to the therapist he had seen twice, and then stopped going to because the co-pays were $55 and the $55 mattered, was the helplessness. Not the schedule, not the money, not the exhaustion. The helplessness. He was a man who had spent his adult life fixing things, and there was nothing to fix here. There was only the list. There was only the waiting. There was only Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and his mother's face when she came out of the sessions, gray, depleted, present but thinned, and the drive home during which they talked about everything except the thing that was true. He had told Sandra they were fine. That word specifically. Fine. She hadn't believed him, but she hadn't pushed, because she understood that some people need the word fine the way they need air. Not because it's true, but because saying anything else would require a collapse they couldn't afford right now. The physical cost of this particular burden was a thing Marcus wore in his shoulders, which had been tight for 14 months in a way no amount of stretching had touched, and in the way he drove, carefully, always under the speed limit, as if speed itself had become a risk he was no longer willing to take. He told Steve all of this, standing next to the craft services table, coffee in hand, while across the room his family laughed at something Damon had said. Steve listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, Steve said, "How much does a kidney transplant cost, fully? The surgery, the recovery, the anti-rejection medication for the first year?" Marcus knew the number exactly. He had looked it up at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday 4 months ago, and had not allowed himself to look again. He said the number. Steve nodded. He said, "Give me a few days." Marcus didn't tell anyone, not that night, not the next week. He drove his mother to dialysis Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday. He ate dinner with Sandra and listened to Destiny describe her plans for the school science fair. He called Renee about Sunday dinner. He went to work. He sat with it the way you sit with something that is too large to put anywhere. On the Thursday, 2 weeks after the taping, in the parking lot, in the Impala with 187,000 miles on it, he listened to Patricia's voicemail. He called back. She told him that funding had been secured to cover the full transplant costs, the surgery, the immediate post-operative care, and 18 months of anti-rejection medication, which was 3 times the standard coverage period, and that a transplant coordination team had been contacted at a hospital in Memphis with a shorter-than-average matching turnaround, and that they wanted to begin the coordination process immediately. She also told him where the money had come from. Steve Harvey had given his production Paycheck for that taping, the full amount, which Patricia did not specify, and which Marcus would not specify later when he told the story, because the amount was not the point, to the foundation. And 3 people in his personal network, people he had called the night of the taping without explaining why, had matched it. Marcus did not speak for a moment. Then he asked Patricia to repeat the part about the anti-rejection medication. 18 months. He asked her to confirm that. She confirmed it. He thanked her. He ended the call. He sat in the parking lot of the dialysis center for 4 more minutes. Then he went inside and sat next to his mother while the machine worked, and he held her hand, and he didn't say anything yet. Gloria looked at him. She looked at him the way mothers look at their children when something has changed in their child's face, and they're not sure whether to ask. "You okay?" she said. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I'm good." He was not fine. He was something entirely different from fine. When he finally told her a month later, they were at her kitchen table on a Sunday evening after dinner. Renee was still doing the dishes. Damon had stayed. Sandra had brought Destiny, who was sitting on the floor doing homework with her notebook open on her knees. The same notebook that had started all of this, though Destiny didn't know that yet. Marcus told his mother the whole story, from the notebook to Steve at Craft Services to Patricia's call to the 18 months. Gloria listened without moving. When he finished, she looked at the kitchen table for a long time. Then she reached over and covered his hand with hers. Her hands that had worked home health care for 31 years, that had bathed strangers and helped strangers walk and held strangers' hands in the night. And she did not say anything. The studio audience was not there. There were no cameras. It was just a Sunday kitchen and a family, and a mother's hand over her son's hand in the silence. But the studio fell completely silent anyway, in Marcus's memory of it, in the way rooms become permanent inside you. Steve had not planned to keep it private. There was no announcement, no press release, no social media post. The foundation had a quiet arrangement with production for situations that arose organically. Situations where the cameras weren't there, but the need was. And the standard practice was to let the family tell it if and when they wanted to. The story got out 14 months later, when Destiny gave a speech at her school's Community Service Day. She was 13 by then. She talked about the notebook. She talked about what it means to write down what you're afraid to say out loud. She talked about what it means when someone reads what you wrote and decides to do something about it. A teacher recorded part of the speech on her phone and posted it. By the next morning, 42,000 people had seen it. By the end of the week, it had reached 6 million. But Steve wasn't done. Even then, from a distance, he wasn't done. The foundation released a statement saying that in response to the public response to Destiny's speech, they were establishing a fund specifically for families with members on organ transplant waiting lists who did not qualify for standard financial assistance. The initial funding was $2.3 million. They were calling it the Gloria Webb Continuity Fund, and Gloria had given permission for her name to be used. Gloria's transplant had occurred 8 months after Patricia's phone call. She had been a match with a 39-year-old donor from outside Nashville. The surgery had taken 7 hours and 20 minutes. Marcus had sat in the waiting room the entire time with Sandra and Renee and Damon and Destiny, who had brought her notebook and written in it steadily for 6 hours and then stopped, and sat with her pen in her hand and waited. The surgery was successful. Recovery was long and careful and real, in the way that medical recovery is always real. Not cinematic, not clean, but incremental and unglamorous, and full of small markers. 3 months after the surgery, Gloria walked to the end of her block and back without assistance. 6 months after, she went back to church for the first time in 2 years. A year after the surgery, she cooked Sunday dinner herself, at her own stove, for the first time in 14 months. She made Damon bring the dishes to the table. She stood at the stove and told him exactly where to put everything, and he did what he was told. And nobody said a word about the fact that she was standing at the stove again. But Steve wasn't done. In the way that good things are never quite done. They ripple. The Gloria Webb Continuity Fund had, by its second year, helped 341 families navigate transplant-related financial crises. 17 of those families had reached surgical completion. In the program's materials, there was a short paragraph in the introduction that Destiny had written, the summer she was 14. Some prayers live in notebooks. Don't throw them away. Today, Marcus still drives the 2009 Impala. The crack in the dashboard has stopped spreading. He doesn't know why. Things sometimes just stop. Gloria rides with him on errands occasionally, sitting in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the city go by. She does not need dialysis anymore. She has been told she may not need it ever again. She has not allowed herself to fully believe this, as a matter of habit, because she is a woman who learned to protect herself by not counting on things before they were certain. But sometimes, on the drive, she reaches over and turns the radio up when a song she likes comes on. And Marcus drives and says nothing, and the crack in the dashboard holds still. What we do when nobody is watching. No cameras, no audience, no moment that can be made into a clip. That is the actual measure of what we believe. A paycheck is a concrete thing. So is a notebook page. So is a phone call at 7:15 in the morning to a mother for whom 7:15 is the hardest time of day. The size of the gesture is not the thing. The decision to make it is the thing. To look at someone and see not just what is visible, but what is being carried, and to decide, without an audience, that it matters. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that what happens in the quiet counts just as much, maybe more, than what happens in the light. Subscribe if you haven't, because every week we go looking for the moments that almost nobody saw.